welcome to the deep dive. So you sent us a ton of material articles, field notes, even some research papers, all circling around this idea of missionary effectiveness, specifically the question of long-term sustainability.
Mm.
And what immediately jumps out is a thesis that just, it cuts right against the grain of what we usually think.
Yeah.
We tend to focus on the external stuff, the politics, the funding.
The cross-cultural challenges, sure.
Exactly. But your sources argue that the biggest threat, the greatest threat, isn't any of that. It's what happens, or maybe what doesn't happen, after the training ends. Zeal, they say, can launch a calling, no doubt, but it can't sustain it.
It can't. And that's the pivot point for this whole conversation, really. It forces us to ask a pretty tough question. If we're seeing these, these high rates of burnout, moral failure, people just quietly leaving early, are those failures of the person's calling? Or are they failures of the system that's supposed to be supporting them?
And the sources seem to land firmly on the system.
They make a really compelling case for it. The argument is that high attrition, it's just a symptom. It's a symptom of a system that cores everything into this amazing, robust, upfront preparation.
Right, the launch.
But then it stops caring once the person is deployed. So our deep dive today is really about analyzing why that initial training, no matter how good it is just not enough for the long haul. We have to understand the shift from, zeal to real endurance.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we're going to get into why that head knowledge, the solid theology we all agree is vital, just doesn't equal readiness on the ground. We'll explore these invisible forms of erosion that just slowly steal a person's hope. So let's start with that first big idea. The sources call it the unexamined assumption that calling plus training equals endurance. We spend so much time and money on the launch.
Immense resources.
Yeah, we give people theological maps, language skills, cultural frameworks, and then we sort of assume their passion and their initial faithfulness will carry them through the next decade.
And the cost of that assumption is so much higher than just, losing one person from the field. It's shortened careers, for sure, but it's also wounded families. It's a loss of trust, both with the local community and back home. And if you look at the mission landscape today, the stressors they've intensified. You have accelerated turnover. You're constantly connected through technology, so you can never really switch off.
Right. No real rest.
None. And you often have less long-term, on-the-ground mentorship. So this makes ongoing support. It's not just a nice idea anymore. It's an absolute strategic necessity.
You probably need to get really clear on the terms here, because training and coaching can sound like the same thing, but the sources draw a really sharp line between them.
They do, and this is a helpful way to think about it. Training is mostly backward-looking. It's preparatory. Training answers questions you already know you need to ask. It gets you ready for what you expect to find. But Coaching is future-oriented. It's interpretive. Coaching helps you interpret your experience as it's happening. It sustains you through all the things you could never, ever have anticipated.
So, training teaches you what to do in a medical emergency.
Exactly. It gives you the protocol. But coaching helps you process the emotional fallout when that protocol fails. Or when a tragedy happens that makes you question why you're even there in the first place. One is about information, the other is about transformation.
That is a really clarifying distinction. It completely reframes sustainability. It's not a problem you can solve by just adding another chapter to the training manual.
Not at all.
It's a pastoral problem. It's a coaching problem. It requires this intentional, ongoing shepherding that follows them. So if coaching is the solution, we have to understand the crisis it's trying to prevent. And I thought the sources were brilliant on this. They describe how failure often isn't this big, dramatic, explosive moment.
No, it's quiet.
It's quietly, gradually, and often invisibly. It's an erosive process. If you're looking for a big scandal, you'll miss the slow thinning of the soul.
That's exactly right. And because it's silent, it's easy for everyone, the person themselves, the sending community, to rationalize it or just miss the signs completely. The material details 4 of these invisible weights that build up.
The first one being emotional exhaustion.
Yeah. And this pressure builds from just prolonged ambiguity. You're not getting clear feedback, or the feedback you get is highly critical. And the danger is that the soul just sort of adapts by narrowing.
Narrowing. What does that mean?
Joy feels a little muted. Being creative feels too risky. Compassion, which should be the core of the work, suddenly feels incredibly costly. Your self-protection system just starts kicking in.
And I love that these sources bring up Elijah. Under the broom tree. He hadn't failed morally or theologically. He was just spent. utterly spent.
It's such a profound model for care. God doesn't show up and immediately correct Elijah's theology or his fear.
He gives him a nap and a meal.
He gives him rest, nourishment. Only after that does God engage him. It shows that exhaustion is a human signal that demands care before correction. And often our systems get that completely backward.
And that emotional narrowing, that exhaustion, it leads right into the second weight, which is spiritual numbness. The sources call it the soul's shield.
It's a form of self-protection, absolutely. When disappointment just keeps coming or when God feels distant, you just go numb. Prayer becomes a transaction. You do it because you're supposed to, not out of intimacy.
And scripture becomes just familiar, not nourishing.
Right. And the real trap here is that people often mistake this numbness for maturity. Like, oh, I can serve without all the emotional highs and lows. But serving without feeling, over time, it just erodes your vitality. The calling becomes a function.
Which is the perfect breeding ground for the third weight, cynicism. This starts as disappointment that it never got processed. So
it becomes emotional armor. And that armor, it protects you from getting hurt again by partners or your agency or whoever, but the cost is hope.
And you can see it, can't you? That shift from curiosity to suspicion.
Exactly. You stop thinking, oh, this is a cultural misunderstanding, and you start thinking, this is malice, this is incompetence. And once that happens, real collaboration is almost impossible.
And the final one, the fourth weight. Isolation disguised as independence. Missionaries are often picked for their resilience, right? Their self-sufficiency.
We celebrate it. But that celebration, it can actually push out communal reliance. It's what the sources call a silent trap. The missionary feels like they can't ask for help because they're afraid of looking weak.
Or that their support might dry up.
Yeah. But here's the key point the sources make. While the person might feel like they chose to be isolated, that isolation is actually a systemic failure. It means the community stopped reaching in.
So it's not on them.
Not entirely. The cost of that systemic failure is paid in talent, tenure, and integrity. And that brings us to the relational solution, which is actually deeply rooted in the New Testament.
Here's where it gets really interesting. Because when we talk about this kind of shepherding, we have to look at the Apostle Paul, not just as a strategist, but as a relentless, intentional coach.
Right. His letters are basically his long-distance coaching sessions. Paul knew that to be effective long-term, you needed someone to help you interpret what was happening on the ground. You can't generate that perspective alone.
So the coaching isn't a fix for a crisis.
It's preventative formation. It strengthens the missionary for whatever is coming next.
And what's so fascinating is that Paul didn't have like a one-size-fits-all coaching program. He completely adapted his method for the person and the context.
Totally. You just have to look at his two main protégés. First, there's Timothy. The sources describe him as a sensitive soul. He was prone to fear, he was young, maybe a bit physically frail. And Paul's coaching integrated everything: heart, head, hand. He didn't just give him theology. He directly addressed Timothy's fears. He reminded him of his calling. He even gave him, really practical advice about his physical health.
Like in 1 Timothy about his stomach.
Exactly. Drink a little wine for your stomach. It shows that good coaching has to be personal. It has to include the whole person, body and soul.
And then you have Titus. And he's coached for what the sources call chaotic contexts, specifically Crete, which was a moral and social mess.
Crete was volatile. So Paul didn't send Titus a simple manual. He coached him for moral clarity and strategic adaptability in the middle of all that complexity. Titus had to navigate disputes, confront false teaching, appoint leaders.
In the middle of chaos.
In the middle of chaos. The coaching was all about developing this intense, real-time wisdom.
So the big lesson from Paul is what the sources call apostolic distance, but relational nearness. It proves this kind of continuous personalized guidance is possible even when you're physically far apart. But practically, for us today, how do we do that? It sounds like we have to move beyond just what the sources call head readiness, the doctrinal grounding. Everyone agrees that's vital, but what else is there?
Right. Head readiness is the foundation, but it's not enough. Most ministry doesn't fail because of bad theology. It fails because of depleted emotional and spiritual capacity.
Okay, so that leads to
heart readiness. This is all about emotional resilience. It's the capacity to process grief and disappointment, honestly. And crucially, it's the ability to maintain intimacy with God without needing to see visible results.
When the ministry feels barren.
Yes. When the fruit isn't there, you have to have this cultivated habit of lament, of reflection that lets you lean into God's presence instead of pulling away.
And the third one, hand readiness, sounds like the practical piece that keeps people from falling into those visible traps we talked about.
That's it exactly. It's practiced faithfulness. It's the critical skills that training often just skips over. Things like how to actually resolve conflict on your team, how to set healthy boundaries without feeling guilty about it.
And recognizing the early warning signs of burnout in yourself.
Yes, it's wisdom applied on the fly.
The sources offer this really simple but, I think, profound tool for pulling all three of these together. It's called the Monthly Sustainability Check-In. And it's not a report. It's a structured conversation.
And it forces that reflection we were talking about. It prevents the quiet erosion. A good check-in looks at 5 critical areas, and it gives the coach and the missionary a shared language to talk about health before a crisis hits.
Okay, so what are they?
First, spiritual vitality. And the question isn't just, did you do your quiet time? It's, is the inner flame alive? Are you still encountering God, or has faith become purely functional?
I like that.
Yeah.
The second is emotional load.
Yeah.
What's been most draining this month, and what have you let yourself feel about it?
Right, forcing the processing. Third is relational strain. Any unresolved tensions with the team, the community, your family. This gets right at the root of that cynicism.
Okay, number 4.
Missional clarity. Basically, amidst all the chaos, are you still clear on the 2 or 3 most important things you're supposed to be doing? This keeps you from getting overwhelmed by the noise.
And 5th, physical rhythms. How's your sleep, your rest, your Sabbath? Which brings us right back to Elijah. Are we nourishing the body as well as the soul?
And if we just zoom back out to the systemic level for a second, the sources are crystal clear on this. Burnout is almost never just a personal failure. It's a systemic oversight. It's the community failing to live out that core mandate from Galatians.
Carry each other's burdens.
Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. Coaching just operationalizes that. It makes burden-bearing a practical, sustainable reality.
So what does this all mean? If we have to distill this whole deep dive down to one truth, what is it?
I think it's that endurance is not some heroic solo project that depends on one person's grit. It's a communal grace. It's the result of intentional, sustained formation.
We've gotten really good at sending.
We have. The church has excelled at equipping and sending. Now, we just have to mature in the task of sustaining those we send. And that requires a decisive shift away from one-off preparation and toward real-time relational shepherding.
And as you reflect on all of this, on how to build these kinds of systems, here's the provocative thought that your source material leaves us with. It's about using the wisdom we already have. What if mission organizations actively built a formal coaching network of retired missionaries?
That's interesting.
The sources call them an untapped reservoir of wisdom. They embody that Titus 2 principle of intergenerational mentorship. They have context-specific insights, hard-won lessons on boundaries, all the embodied wisdom that no manual can ever replace. Integrating them into the system isn't just about honoring the past. It's an act of stewardship over the legacy of endurance itself.